My name is Aisha, and this is my story. I was born into a poor family in a small, overcrowded village. We lived in a tiny house with cracked walls and a leaking roof. My father was a farmer, struggling to grow enough crops on the dry land, while my mother worked tirelessly sewing clothes for the neighbors. I had 2 younger siblings, and though we loved each other, we often fought because there was never enough to go around. Despite all this, my dream was simple. I wanted to study, get a good job, and change my family's life. But in my house, dreams were a luxury we couldn't afford. My father often told me, "Aisha, stop wasting time with books. You'll marry and take care of your husband's home anyway." It broke my heart. I loved my family, but they never understood my desire to learn. My mother, too, would scold me if she saw me reading instead of helping with household chores. "Dreams don't feed hungry stomachs," she would say harshly. One evening, after a long day of working in the fields with my father, I sat under the dim light of a kerosene lamp, studying a worn-out English textbook that an old schoolteacher had given me. Suddenly, my mother snatched the book from my hands. "Why waste time, Aisha?" she shouted. "We need your help, not your silly dreams." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I swallowed them. Crying wouldn't change my reality. Life continued this way until I turned 18. One day, while walking to fetch water from the well, I met someone who would change my life forever. His name was Armon. He was tall, with kind brown eyes and a warm smile. He had recently moved to our village to teach at the local school. I didn't speak to him that day, but his presence felt comforting, like a ray of sunlight piercing through dark clouds. A few days later, I saw Armon again. This time, he was teaching a group of children under a large tree. I stopped to watch from a distance, captivated by his patience and enthusiasm. To my surprise, he noticed me. "Do you want to join us?" he asked with a smile. I hesitated. "I'm too old for school," I whispered. "Learning has no age limit," he said gently. His words ignited a spark of hope in my heart. Over time, Armon began to notice how eager I was to learn. He offered to teach me after his regular classes. I was thrilled, but when I told my parents about it, they were furious. "You think this teacher will feed us?" my father yelled. "Stop dreaming, Aisha." "But Baba," I pleaded, "if I study, I can get a job and help our family." "Enough," he roared. "If you disobey us, you will have no place in this house." Tears streamed down my face as I ran to my tiny room. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling trapped between my family's harshness and my dreams. Despite the warnings, I continued to meet Armon in secret. He taught me English, math, and even history. He also shared stories about the world beyond our village, a world full of possibilities. Slowly, my confidence grew, and I began to believe in myself. Armon never asked for anything in return. His kindness was unconditional. As weeks turned into months, I realized I had developed feelings for him. But how could I confess? I was just a poor girl from a troubled family, while he was an educated, noble man. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I finally gathered the courage to tell him. My heart raced as I said, "Armon, I don't know if I should say this, but I think I'm in love with you." He looked at me with gentle eyes and said, "Aisha, you are brave to speak your heart. But love is not just about words. It's about growing together. Before we think about a future, you need to stand on your own feet." His words, though painful, inspired me. I realized he wanted me to succeed not just for him, but for myself. One day, Armon told me about a scholarship program in the city for underprivileged girls. If I qualified, it would change my life. But applying for it meant telling my family. When I brought it up, chaos erupted in our house. "You want to leave us and go to the city? What will people say?" my father bellowed. My mother, too, cried, "Do you want to shame us? Girls don't leave their homes." For the first time in my life, I stood up for myself. "If you love me, let me go. I promise I'll come back and change our lives." My father looked at me with a mixture of anger and sadness, but finally, he said, "Go, then. But don't come back if you fail." The day I left for the city was bittersweet. My heart ached as I hugged my siblings goodbye, but the fire inside me burned brighter than ever. The city was overwhelming, tall buildings, bustling streets, and so many unfamiliar faces. But I remembered Armand's encouragement and stayed focused. The scholarship test was challenging, but I gave it my all. Weeks later, when the results came, I cried tears of joy. I had been accepted. Along with financial support, the program provided housing and education. The next few years were transformative. I worked tirelessly, balancing my studies and part-time jobs. I wrote letters to my family, though they rarely replied. It hurt, but I understood their struggles. Armand stayed in touch, cheering me on from afar. I often wondered if he missed me the way I missed him. Years later, I graduated with honors and secured a good job at an NGO. My first paycheck brought me indescribable joy. I sent most of it home, along with a heartfelt letter to my parents. To my surprise, they responded, asking me to visit. When I returned to the village, I was met with both love and regret. My father hugged me tightly, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Aisha," he said. "I was wrong to hold you back." Armand was still in the village, teaching as passionately as ever. When I met him, he smiled and said, "You've become the woman I always knew you could be." This time, when I told him I loved him, he didn't hesitate. "And I've always loved you, Aisha," he replied. We were married in a simple ceremony under the same tree where our journey began. Together, we started a school for girls in the village, ensuring no one else would have to fight as I did. Looking back, I'm grateful for every hardship. They taught me resilience, courage, and the power of love. My story is proof that no dream is too big, and no heart is too broken to heal. Moral of the story: hardships are temporary, but determination can change lives. Trust in your dreams and fight for what's right, even if the world is against you.